Hi there. Yes, my Twitter avatar is very weird. I grabbed it from an animated GIF, so I didn't know which frame in the animated GIF it was going to eventually put up on the screen, and it's kind of bizarre. I'm Scott Lamb. I'm from BuzzFeed.com, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about content and publishing, but also a little bit about native advertising. I just kind of want to walk through some of the things that we've learned at BuzzFeed over the course of the last couple of years as it relates to both the art and science of social publishing, but also the business. So very quickly, just to say who BuzzFeed is and what it is that we do, we're a social news and entertainment media company. We're at about 120 million uniques a month and growing right now globally. About 30% of that is international, so outside the US, and I'm in charge of hopefully growing that number. About 75% of our views come from social media, so from Facebook, from Twitter. Really, for us, social is the front page of the website. About half of our audience is in the realm of 18 to 34, so skews a little more young. And half of those visits are from mobile and growing. So for us, and I think this is true for any digital publisher, thinking about mobile is really, really key. If it's not going to work on a mobile device, you're immediately losing half of your audience. This is a little bit about where BuzzFeed came from and kind of our way of thinking about the publishing world. In brief, over the course of the web's life cycle, we've seen this switch where initially people's first experience of the web was mostly through portals. Portals are still very powerful in some places in the world, but that was how people understood what the web was. People thought AOL was in fact the internet, and that's how they would experience everything online. With the growth of search, largely with Google, this was a new model for people understanding the world. You had a question about something, you wanted to learn about some piece of information, you'd go to the search bar and type it in. In publishing, this had the effect of having this huge industry of people who were creating content to start thinking about machines. They were thinking about keywords, about how to play well with Google. Google, obviously, search is still a big part of the way that people interact with the web. But the new mode, and the one that BuzzFeed is most comfortable working in, is social. And this is where you rely on your personal network to tell you things about themselves, but also to tell you about the world. So another way that we think about this, the current group, or the current way of publishing online, is to think about the Bored at Work network. This is a huge network. It could be bored at conferences too. I don't see too many phones out, but it sort of describes this massive number of people, that really unprecedented in history, who have time during the day. They're connected online at work, and either they're not doing their jobs or they have 15 minutes that they're on a break and they want to read something interesting, they want to share something interesting with people in their lives. So it's vast, it's bigger than any traditional network, and it's also distributed. So it's not the broadcast model of one-to-many, it's many-to-many. This was something that we thought a lot about early on in BuzzFeed's history. As the mobile growth has happened in the industry, we now also think about the board and line network. And this could be also the board watching TV network. This is people who, it describes, I think all of us have a mobile device with them almost at all times, and they want to be able to share and consume content no matter where they are. So I want to talk first a little bit about the art of social publishing. This is the soft stuff that comes from working in the editorial side of the business, as I do. This actually came up in the presentation just before, that thinking about emotion is really, really important when you're thinking about trying to make content that people share. With social content, you're dealing with human beings. You're trying to reach them and get them to read what you've written and find it so surprising or moving that they're going to share it. There's really no trick to that. There's no magic formula to making that happen. You have to appeal to their humanity in some way. So this was a story that we ran on BuzzFeed about 1.5 years ago. It tells a very tragic, but I think ultimately uplifting tale of a young man who went off to war and simultaneously had this relationship come into his life. It was a very visual story. It had about 5 million views on BuzzFeed, most of them from sharing, because I think it really spoke to something very essential in all of us. We've all dealt with different struggles in our lives, and we have all hopefully dealt with relationships as part of those as well. Another thing that's really important is thinking a lot about identity, the identities of the people who you're trying to get to share things. Anyone who is left-handed will probably recognize what's going on here. It's a right-handed world, and being left-handed can be very frustrating at some times. So BuzzFeed, we did a post about the trials and tribulations of being left-handed. I think it was 25 things anyone who's left-handed will know, one of which is when you're writing, you're going to get graphite on your hand because your hand has to move across the page where you've just been writing. The reason I think this works so well is for people who are left-handed, it's a big part of their identity. It's a part of their daily experience. So anyone who was left-handed or anyone who knew people who were left-handed would share a post like this. Capturing the moment is also super, super important in thinking about the art of social publishing. There was actually, earlier today, the slide about the Oreos ad from the Super Bowl. Not this last one, but the one before. Oreo was really able to capture the moment really well. This massive thing happened during the Super Bowl, and they were able to kind of spin it and make a joke about it that related to their product. This particular image was from a moment about 2 years ago in New York. There was an earthquake on the East Coast, a very minor earthquake. We do not get earthquakes very often. So sort of in a joking way, we put together a post about the worst things that happened in the earthquake on the East Coast, one of which was someone's yogurt cup fell over. This was shared really widely because it didn't have a very long lifespan for this post to work, but there was this moment, this collective moment where a lot of the Eastern Seaboard had experienced this thing together. And on Facebook, people wanted to be able to make jokes and connect with other people who'd experienced the same thing. So we had to be very quick, and this is one of the things that we came up with. Another thing about social publishing is that it turns out that cute animals deserve respect. I think when people talk about the internet, they like to bring up cats as a way of dismissing it and saying, the internet is a silly place for silly people. But animals are not silly at all. I mean, throughout human history, they've been one of the primary ways that we relate to one another. We have relationships with them as well, but we often will use animals, and specifically cats, as a canvas to sort of broadcast our own emotions and thoughts and feelings. And they're a great way to communicate with one another. If you're having a rough day, you have a friend send you a cute animal. It makes you feel better. They feel better because they've helped you out. They are much more nuanced and important, I think, than just to be dismissed as cat lists. Obviously, humor is very social. It's sort of inherently, you see a joke like this, and you kind of want to share it with people. Terrible puns seem to work really well online for some reason, but there's a natural social imperative in finding something funny. If you learn a new joke and it's good, the first thing that you want to do is tell someone else about it. On the more serious side, there's also, I think, a real social imperative behind certain social causes. So in the US, marriage equality is a really big issue right now. It has been for the last few years. At BuzzFeed, we've done a lot of content about the changing laws, and these posts, especially if it's people getting married for the first time, they share very, very widely. And I think one of the things this shows is that hitting the like button on Facebook has a wide range of meaning. It doesn't just mean that you like something. Sometimes it means that you believe in it, or you want to show people that you support it. And that's something that's also very inherently social. One thing to not do, I think, if you're interested in social publishing, is to publish content that's going to embarrass people if they share it. Leaked celebrity nudes are a thing that, a post like this about Scarlett Johansson would do well traffic-wise. Certainly people would click on it, but they're not going to share it. They're not going to share something that makes them look, at all skeevy or would weird out anyone in their social network. So it's definitely something, for the most part, that we at BuzzFeed totally avoid. So I want to talk really quickly about the science of social publishing. There unfortunately is no magic algorithm that can tell you what's going to be shared. There's really no way in advance to know what things are going to take off. I totally agree also with Professor Wind on the notion that you have to just do a lot of experiments. You have to experiment rigorously, and then you can measure those experiments. So at BuzzFeed, one of the things that we do whenever we publish a piece of content, and this is true for our editorial team, but it's also true for advertisers. We measure how it does. We measure how it's being spread. And the way that we measure it is look at the social rank. So basically, this is a way that lets us look at, for any given piece of content, how likely is it that a person is going to spread it? They're going to share it with at least one other person. We want to maximize this, but it also lets us know when we should leave something alone. So as each thing gets published, we seed it on BuzzFeed's platform, and we can see very quickly, is this something that people are sharing, or is it something that they're not really enjoying at all? And if it's the latter, then we will not show it as much, but if it's doing well, we can optimize for it and spread it out even further. And that's how we can take things that are mildly viral and at least give them a good push. So this is sort of what that breakdown looks like. We're always hoping to get towards an R of 1, which is just basically for every person that comes along, they're going to share it, and at least one other person is going to see that. But we do a lot of testing. We have a lot of feedback. I think getting data about how content is performing is incredibly important in social publishing. What this means on the user end is that we often will change the way that the interface on BuzzFeed works depending on what kind of content we're showing. This is an example that was something that we developed looking at how things were being shared when users came to BuzzFeed from Pinterest. So we noticed that people coming from Pinterest, they like to share things a lot. I mean, that's the whole point of Pinterest. But they would only share things on Pinterest or on Facebook. They weren't then taking it and putting things on Twitter. So we did some testing. We did some A/B testing with the various ways the buttons were working on our page for users that were coming to us from Pinterest, and tried to expand the sharing that we were seeing on both Facebook and Pinterest for those users. Another thing that we do is provide for each piece of content a dashboard that basically shows the overall performance of the post. Again, this is for both the ad side and on the editorial side. And it lets us look very, very quickly at, is it being shared on Facebook? Is it being shared on Pinterest? The red traffic in this graph is the thing that we're mostly interested in. That's the social lift. So that's basically all the traffic that's coming to a post outside of BuzzFeed's control. The blue is us being able to place it on the homepage or do a lot of B-page promotion for it. But if we don't see that red sort of starting to take off and achieve a little bit of independence from the blue, then we know the post isn't maybe as successful as it should be. One of the other things that is incredibly, incredibly important in social publishing is thinking a lot about the platform that you're going for. You're basically hoping that your readers are going to be your publishers, and the way that they publish varies where they're publishing. So, there's two very dominant worldviews that we deal with in the online sphere. One is the Google worldview, that there's information out there. We as human beings have questions, and their job is to efficiently connect us with the answers to the questions we have. And it's a great model. It's worked incredibly, incredibly well. An example of this would be if I was not a very good golfer, and I am a terrible golfer, I might look for, how can I make my golf swing better? And if Google's doing its job, and it definitely will be, it would take me to a page like this about how I can get rid of my slice and learn to hit a controlled draw. So that's a great interaction, but it's not particularly social. It's me coming up with a question that's very specific to my life, going to Google and getting connected to this piece of information, which hopefully will help it. I might share it with some friends, if I have a friend who also has the same golfing problem, but largely it's an answer to a question that's very personal to me. Facebook's model is a little bit different. They see information and media that's out there in the world as a means both for communication and self-expression. So inherently the act of finding things out leads to this separate secondary act, which is sharing and expression. In this world, basset hounds are super important. As it turns out, when basset hounds are running, they make really, really ridiculous faces. They're amazing, but you would never think to yourself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to Google basset hounds running to see if they have crazy faces. This is just like something that happens to be true. But as soon as you see this, at least if you're like me, your initial response is, I want to share this with everyone. Like, who knew that the basset hounds looked so crazy? So we put together in a post, basset hounds running, like the most plain vanilla obvious title in the world, and it still got 1.2 million views because it was surprising and fun. Again, this goes back to content sort of being like a gift that you share with people when they're having a rough day. Sending someone a basset hound running when they're having a bad week is a great thing to do. Similarly, I mean, we see this with a lot of different type of content that people will share to have this mode of interaction and expression. It can be about cooking, can be about pop culture, can be about describing your social network and talking about the people that you're close to. It can be about cute pigs. It doesn't need to be terribly, terribly complicated. One of the things that we've been doing recently at BuzzFeed, which it's a fairly new experiment for us, is quizzes. This was a quiz that we did a couple of months ago. Had about 20 million views. Hopefully some of the people in the room have seen this and maybe taken it. It was actually, it was kind of an interesting play on a notion that has existed for a long time of the best cities in the world to live in. This was a version of that where the answers were all about the user themselves. So if you got Paris, it meant that you're really cultured and interesting. If you got Portland, Oregon, it meant that you're really into coffee and obscure indie bands. So it was a way of talking about the world as a means of expressing yourself. So lastly, I want to talk really quickly about the business of social publishing. All of BuzzFeed's revenue comes from social content marketing. So this is our version, basically, of native advertising. It's ads that live on BuzzFeed that are like our content. They're a similar experience for the user, but they have a brand sponsor and they have a brand message behind them. We don't do any banner ads. The click-through rates of these ads are much, much higher, I think, than the industry standard. And one of the reasons is the ads themselves are really good. We hold our ads to a very high standard. We want them to compete basically with content. So we've worked with a wide variety of brands, and I'll just show a few examples of some campaigns that we've done. This was one with Virgin Mobile, 10 movie plots that would have completely changed if they had cell phones. This is true of so many movies, it's unbelievable. But it's kind of a funny piece of content. It carries with it the brand message as well. It really feels like, it feels like a gift. It feels like, even if you know this is from Virgin Mobile, you think it's funny, you're going to share it with people. You're not turned off by the fact that it's very clearly branded. Similarly, we did this campaign with the Toyota Prius about cool hybrid animals, which was, obviously getting across the notion of mashups and hybrids, which tie into the car that they were trying to sell, but then allowed us to put up some really ridiculous-looking pictures of animals that have been mixed up. One of the other nice things about doing social publishing for brands is that not only can you create really, really good content, you can see really, really high levels of engagement. So this is another post that I think of as a good example of content as a gift. It was from Smashbox, some tips about doing new ways to do your makeup, just some very, very helpful hints. And the thing that was most interesting to us about it was then seeing on Twitter the really high level engagement and people thanking the brand for putting these tips together for them. So lastly, I just want to speak very quickly about social publishing. I think it's really having a moment right now. I think that in 2014, with Asia being one of the places with the largest number of social media users in the world, I think it is now #1. Social publishing isn't some niche market. It's gotten really, really huge. On the content side, we're starting to see things that we haven't seen before. BuzzFeed's growth over the last 6 months has been largely fueled by this. We're seeing it a lot. We're seeing it across our publishing network as well. So many of the partners that we work with, they're seeing great growth in traffic. Things that people would have never thought would happen online are happening, and a lot of those have to do with media. We're seeing a lot more of serious reporting and scoops coming from online sources. We're seeing people reading long-form content. This is a post that we did that has it's an 8,000-word piece about a man buying a home in Detroit for $500. It's over 1 million views, and half of those were on mobile. We're starting to see a lot of people read long investigative journalism on a device of some type, and that's a real switch from the way that we were thinking about web publishing even 2 or 3 years ago. Investigative reporting is incredibly important. I think the professor before mentioned surprising stories. There's nothing more surprising than investigative journalism that totally changes the way that you look at the world. Video, also increasingly important. We're doing a lot of foreign correspondent work at BuzzFeed and really expanding our global reach. And that involves also opening up new editions. We have offices in London and in Sydney, and as of last year, Spanish, French, and Portuguese versions of the site. All these things while growing and being profitable. Concluding thoughts, I just want to go back over some of these things. Social publishing is an art, a science, and a business. I think really to succeed in this world, you need to have all three. Understanding your platform is incredibly important. Things spread differently on Google than they do on Facebook. This shift to social has also come to advertising. So it's no longer just content that needs to be thinking about the social sphere. It's also advertisers. And online publishing used to be small, and now it's big. There's a lot of stuff happening online that a couple of years ago even people wouldn't have predicted. So that's it for me. I'll take some questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, first, a round of applause for our guest. Now, do we have any questions? There's certainly quite a lot of buzz on Twitter as you're talking. And in particular, what people seem to be commenting on is the fact that half of your traffic is on mobile.
Yes, and growing. When we, both for our editors and on the branded side, mobile is really the primary thing that we think about now. It's where everything starts.
All right. Is that where you start your conversation? Maybe they're just type. Who thinks that mobile is the place to start when publishing? Who thinks mobile doesn't count at all? Who would like to have another cup of tea? Right. Well, it looks, I think nobody can deny it. Ladies and gentlemen, please give another round of applause for our guest from BuzzFeed today, Scott Lamb.